Ladies and gentlemen, the madness that has been the 2019 NBA offseason continues. Week after week, big trades and signings have been going down, and it's to the point now where moves such as Anthony Davis being traded to the Lakers and Kemba Walker signing with the Celtics seem like ancient history. This feeling was even further compounded yesterday evening when out of nowhere the bomb was dropped on us that Russell Westbrook, even though most speculated he would end up with either the Detroit Pistons or Miami Heat, ended up being traded to the Houston Rockets to join up with his former teammate James Harden, giving the Western Conference yet another dangerous backcourt duo. And to anyone out there thinking that this trade marks the end of the madness that we have witnessed so far, well, that couldn't be further from the truth, as the trade of Westbrook to the Rockets guaranteed us that there will be at least one more massive trade that goes down this summer, as now Chris Paul, who was traded to the Thunder in exchange for Westbrook, is guaranteed to be traded as well, with reports already coming out claiming that the Thunder are working with CP3 and his agent to find him a different team to play on, since it doesn't make sense for Chris Paul to be playing on a team like OKC, who after acquiring almost every draft pick available for the foreseeable future, are clearly in a rebuilding phase. So with that being the case, today we're going to be taking a look at a few teams who I think would roll the dice by trading for 8-time All-Star and future Hall of Fame point guard Chris Paul. Let's get right into it. After refusing to give the Thunder what they were asking for in exchange for Russell Westbrook, the Miami Heat are still in the market to land another star to pair next to their newly acquired Jimmy Butler. And while the idea of trading for a 34-year-old Chris Paul certainly isn't as attractive as the idea of trading for Russell Westbrook, the price that the Heat would have to pay to get Chris Paul as opposed to Westbrook could at least give the Heat reason to roll the dice on a deal, as Miami could simply deal contracts such as James Johnson, Dion Waiters, and Goran Dragic to the Thunder in exchange for Chris Paul, and not having to give up a single one of their young players in return for Paul would also be a massive win in and of itself. And that's not to mention the fact that Jimmy Butler and Chris Paul have been trying to team up for a while now. Before Butler was a part of the sign and trade deal that sent him to Miami in the first place, it was widely assumed that he'd be playing alongside Chris Paul and James Harden in Houston. That was the number one option on Jimmy Butler's list. What's more is that the same thing can be said before Butler was traded to Philadelphia midway through last season, as once again, Chris Paul and the Houston Rockets were atop Butler's wish list. So while I might be mentioning other teams who do have the potential to trade for Chris Paul right now, it has to be said that the Miami Heat seem to be the most likely destination. The Los Angeles Lakers have no doubt been one of the busiest teams this summer. While they may have missed out on signing Kawhi Leonard, a move which if the Lakers were able to execute would have guaranteed their spot as the best team in the league, they were still able to sign a slimmed down DeMarcus Cousins and fill out the rest of the roster by bringing back players like Rajon Rondo, JaVale McGee, and KCP, and on top of all of that, they were also able to sign a solid 3-and-D player in Avery Bradley. Look, things might not have gone exactly according to plan for the Lakers, but still, any team who lands a talent such as Anthony Davis by no means had a poor summer. One thing about the current Lakers roster though that has some people talking is their lack of point guards. They did bring back Rondo, but other than that, there's no real point guards on their roster, and that is why LA says that unless something changes, that come time for the season to start, LeBron James will be their starting point guard, which would be far from the worst thing possible, as even though he's never officially wielded the title of point guard, we all know that LeBron has pretty much played that role his entire career thus far. So now enter Chris Paul, one of LeBron James's closest friends in the league, as well as a player who would have already been a Laker many years ago had it not been for former NBA Commissioner David Stern rejecting a trade that was seeing Chris Paul sharing the backcourt with Kobe Bryant. And now he could once again be a player who the Lakers take a look at if they feel that they are in need of another playmaker outside of Rondo and LeBron. The challenges the Lakers would face, however, in trading for Paul is whether or not they'd be willing to part ways with young players such as Kyle Kuzma. Also, if the Lakers did trade for Paul, would they be convinced that both he and Rondo could coexist in the same locker room, since there is a tad bit of bad history between the two of them. Overall though, I wouldn't say Chris Paul to the Lakers is as likely to go down as Chris Paul to the Heat, but still the Lakers aren't a team to be overlooked in any possible trade situation. The next few teams that I have to mention are my wild cards, teams who I don't think are the most likely to make a trade, but at the same time, You never know. And for the teams I'm about to mention, Chris Paul could be a player who helps them become even more competitive in their respective conferences. And the first of my wildcard teams is the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs are in a very interesting position in the NBA, with a mixture of star players such as DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge already on the team, as well as nice talented young players like DeJounte Murray and Derek White, both of which being point guards already. So in a way, you could say that it would make no sense for the Spurs to trade for Chris Paul since they already have a couple of nice young guards. But with the Western Conference continuing to get tougher and tougher to compete in, the Spurs may be forced to look into making some bigger moves if they still plan on being a serious threat in the West. And pairing the two great basketball minds of Chris Paul and Greg Popovich together would boost the Spurs' competitiveness overall out West. And also, just keeping it real here, Chris Paul has always been a player who would be easy to imagine as a member of the Spurs. Just seems like the kind of player that Pop would love to coach. There's no doubt in my mind that had Victor Oladipo not gotten injured right before the All-Star break last season, that the Indiana Pacers would have finished as one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. Since right before Oladipo was injured, Indy was neck and neck with both the Toronto Raptors and the Milwaukee Bucks for the title of best in the East. And even though the Pacers were able to steal away a very underrated free agent in Malcolm Brogdon from the Milwaukee Bucks, they were still dealt a couple of serious blows, as not only did their starting point guard and Darren Collison decide to retire out of the blue, ditching basketball to become more involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses, but they also lost the player who stepped up the most in the absence of Victor Oladipo last season in Bojan Bogdanovic. Regardless of that though, Indiana is once again slated to be one of the top teams in the East this year. Maybe not the favorites to come out of the East right now, but a threat that teams like Milwaukee and Philadelphia will have to take very seriously should they meet in the playoffs. However, should the Pacers be able to trade for Chris Paul, the threat that they present not just to the Sixers and the Bucks, but to the rest of the NBA as well will be even more real, since one area in which the Pacers often struggled last year was with their lack of playmaking and offensive talent outside of Victor Oladipo. Indy would typically have to rely on their defense and grit alone in order to win games, especially once again when Victor Oladipo went down with his injury. The addition of Chris Paul to the roster though would give them another player who can not only run the offense but also get his own basket if need be when Oladipo was resting on the bench. Should the Miami Heat turn sour at the idea of paying a 38-year-old Chris Paul over $40 million in a few years, and the Los Angeles Lakers find themselves unable to part ways with Kyle Kuzma plus the other necessary assets needed to make the deal work, then all of a sudden I think that the Orlando Magic could become the frontrunners to land CP3 in a deal. Like I mentioned in a video regarding the possible trade destination for Russell Westbrook last week, the Orlando Magic could be the team in the NBA most desperate for an upgrade at the point guard position. That is assuming that they are trying to compete in the Eastern Conference, like indicated by the moves that they made so far this offseason. Currently, the only point guards that the Orlando Magic have on the roster are DJ Augustin as well as Markelle Fultz. Augustin is a player best suited for coming on the bench, and while Fultz still does have all the upside in the world when healthy, whether or not he will ever be healthy and get back to being the player that he was during his college days is still very much up in the air. And with teams such as the Miami Heat and even the Detroit Pistons improving a bit over the summer, the competition that the Orlando Magic will face for a spot in the Eastern Conference playoffs this upcoming season seems like it'll be even stiffer than the competition they faced for their spot in the playoffs last year. So once again, anytime a point guard's name is mentioned in the trade rumor this year, you should at least expect the Magic's name to be tossed around in the mix. That's it though. Those are the 5 teams who I think could be the most interested in trading for Chris Paul. I'm curious to know what you guys think though, so let me know where you'd like to see Chris Paul end up down in the comments section below. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Originally, the next video I was planning to release was the best moments from the 2018-2019 NBA season that I've been working on for the past few weeks now, but of course, things happen that just throw plans off course. That being said though, expect the next video to drop in just a couple of days, and if you don't want to miss out, then go ahead and make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with post notifications turned on as well. And all of that being said though, you guys are going to know that you are the real MVPs, and until next time, keep getting the buckets, Team SDC, and I'm out of here. Peace.